What's up, guys? Welcome back. We're going to be doing Corvette build series episode 3. We're going to dig into the electronics and wiring and kind of how I'm going to lay that out. Mike and I actually are all loaded up for the paint booth, so we thought I got some time to kill today. I don't obviously just want to waste time because we're running out of time. So we're going to start diving into my wiring, how I'm going to do my switch panel, my relay board, all that. Generally speaking, I use like an ARC panel or ECU Masters or Haltech or something like a PMU. I'm actually not going to do that on this car for a variety of different reasons. One, I want to make the car user-friendly. I'm not going to like rent it and always be around, so I don't want to put a PMU in the car and there be like a wiring issue or something wrong with the PMU and they don't know how to deal with it, they don't know how to work on it. I want this car to be more user-friendly, less advanced team-friendly, if that makes sense. So I would normally just go with an ARC panel or something like this, but the problem I have with the ARC panel is they're kind of limited. So you can only do, I think it's 8 relays on one board, and they're only 25 or 30 amp relays. So like the fans I use, I like to use I think I normally use a 40 amp relay, something like that. Anyways, I have to check my diagram stuff, but the ARC panel, I always end up having to add relays to the system or something anyway, so I figured this time I'm just going to build my own custom relay board, so we're going to show you how I'm going to do that and what's going to be in this car, how I'm going to do all the battery wiring and stuff, so we'll set up the time lapse and get going. Interrupting the time lapse real quick to show you guys kind of why I'm doing it, the way I'm doing it, and what I'm going to use. Some people can say it's wrong, some people are going to say it's right. It's worked for me for the past, I don't know, 10, 15, whatever, how many years it's been I've been doing stuff like this. So I made little marks on my toolbox. You can see there's a tiny black mark right there. There's one right here below the ground block. There's one right behind the relays, and there's one right here. And that's just so I know the dimensions of the panel that I'm going to cut to mount this to put it in the car. And that's because I'm trying to fit it right here in my Corvette, between the top and the between the lower dash bar and the top of where basically the windshield's going to be. I'm going to build mounts there. I think this one was like 12 by 14 inches or something, so I know that is the mounting space I have to work with. So I'm drawing basically a little box on my toolbox. And I just need to make sure I keep the fuse box and the relays and everything within the box, within half an inch or an inch or so. I have some room to play with in the car, but I don't want a aluminum panel that's 2 feet wide taking up basically all the room under my dash. So I'm basically going to use relays, just conventional relays with a fuse box. I have a grounding block. I have 2 basically, I don't know, power interrupter boxes, whatever you want to call them, that the signals out from the relays will go into and then get split. And this side will go out to the accessories, whatever they're running in the car, headlights, taillights, brake lights, whatever it may be. And that's just so I have the ability to basically disconnect everything from the relay board if I need to and split everything up so it's not a solid wire going all the way back to, let's say, the taillights, and then something's wrong, I need to take the wire off and, oh, well, you can't. You have to basically cut the wire. I don't like doing that, so we'll split all the cable connections here. We'll have main power in and fuses. I've got labels for this. We'll print labels for all these. And then I also have some fused relays here. These will be more for the back of the car. I'm not going to put every relay for the car on this board. I'm actually going to put all the fuel pump relays and that whole system on a separate board, basically somewhere probably right in this region. That way these fuses actually glow red when they're blown. So for some reason, if a fuel pump or something ever blew a fuse or something like that, we have quick diagnosis. You don't have to look up under the dash or reach under the dash or stick your head under there or anything. If I ever have problems with blown fuses, it seems to always be fuel pumps is the problem that everybody has. The pumps short out, the pumps get too hot, pull too much amp, something, it knocks a fuse out. So quick diagnosis thing there. But this will be like headlights, taillights, brake lights, all the nitrous controls, stuff like that will all be off this main system. And just general tools. Crimpy tools, my favorite tool. Love this thing. It's like a rapid crimper. Marine grade heat shrink because it's got glue inside of it, so when you put it over all the connections and you heat them up, glue seeps out, so it makes the connection even stronger. General just like glue filled eyelet connectors. Same thing, you put some heat to them, they shrink down on the wire, glue oozes out, just makes the connection infinitely stronger. And that's pretty much it. I've just got my Nitrous outlet control panel here to run my Nitrous stuff. Just a general Moroso switch panel, which I don't know if that's the one I'm going to use. It's just what I'm using for mock-up. And then my kill switch. Let's talk about the kill switch, actually. The kill switch in the Corvette is kind of weird because there's nowhere to really mount it. So, generally speaking, you'd mount it probably somewhere in here, and the driver's cowl on the windshield, or on the passenger side, and just run a remote cable over. FD rules stipulate, I believe this year, it has to be on the driver's side. I think in previous years you could petition it and get it put on the other side of the car if you needed to, but yeah, apparently you can't do that anymore. So what I'm actually going to do is put it inside the car where the driver has access to it, and then run a remote pull cable up through the dash and out, and that pull cable will come out through a hole that is down there that is already pre-cut in the dash for basically the factory windshield wiper motor stuff to come through. So I'll have a remote cable, which is legal. So that's going to be that. We'll get back to basically time-lapsing assembling the entire relay board so you guys can see how that goes, and we'll see you at the end. So a little electrical update. That was a time lapse that I shortened extensively because it took me way longer than what I'm guessing is 2 minutes in the time lapse to make this half of the relay board. I'm just going to kind of show you what I'm doing. I'm not going to film the other half because it's basically you just add 5 more relays, wire them back in, same thing. But here we've got 5 relays. These are 30, 40 amp relays, which is basically like 40 amp inrush current, 30 amp consistent current relays. My tiny fuse box, ground block. So I'm actually going to take 2 grounds off of this, take them to the chassis. This is just a power split block. So like these top ports right here, well, the bottom ports are the basically output trigger from the relay. These will go to the accessories like the headlights, taillights, brake lights, fuel pumps, stuff like that. And then these right here will go to the switch panel, which is over here, and these basically trigger the relays on. I'm gonna 12 volt trigger them, not ground trigger them. Fuse box just in case something pulls too much amperage and it blows a fuse, and then we'll have another bank of relays right here, but these will be 60-80 amp relays, so 80 amp inrush current, 60 amp continuous current, and what those are gonna be for are basically I'll have 2 on here, 1 for each fan, and those will be input triggered by the Holley, because I'm going to have automatic fan control in this car. The third one will be for the bottle heater, and the fourth 2 will just be backups in case one of those burns out for some reason or something happens, or I end up adding accessories down the line that require additional current. So we'll see about that. I'm going to show you guys where I'm going to put the relay board, although this might be kind of hard with one hand. So I'm going to put the relay board in the Corvette. Please stay. Something like this. So as you can see, it still hits my Terminator X Max ECU, so I'm gonna have to trim it down about another 1/2 inch. Then we'll build 2 little bracky boys that go from the aluminum to the dash bar to hold it there. 2 more, they go 2 or 1 more, they go to the factory rib nuts up there, and then that should give me a lot of work area in the car. We modified the dash, so the dash comes out super easy. 3 bolts, the whole dash comes out, and nothing will be permanently attached to the dash. So in previous cars, I've had like the wiring harness zip tied to the dash and a bunch of other stuff, but with the way the Corvette dash is, it's more of a shell, not really like a full dash, and everything clips out of it. So we're making mounts for everything, so this time if something happens behind the dash, there'll be no crawling under the dash to work on the car, no lying upside down under the dash. Like, just yank the 3 bolts, pull the dash straight out across the steering wheel. You can get a clear view of everything, clear view of all the Terminator X Max lights, clear view of the relay board, clear view of all the wiring. It should make things much easier. We also, the Corvette only has like 4 holes in the factory from the in the firewall from the factory, and I actually ended up plating them all and covering them because I don't like where the locations of any of them are. So I drilled a new hole right here, 2.5 inches, and I've got a 3 inch outside diameter, 1 inch inside diameter like 2-piece seal coming to cover that up. That's where all the wiring and nitrous lines are going to go through the car. And that comes out conveniently right behind the relay board. So it should make it super easy to tie everything in. Yeah, that's pretty much where we're at with wiring. The only other thing, the next step will be is cutting up my factory body harness. I originally was intending to sell that body harness because they're worth a good bit of money for Corvettes, but I didn't realize how many of the connectors I would actually need and how many of them are difficult to get currently. So I can't order any of the connectors for the brake lights. So I'm basically just gonna cut the headlight connectors off the old harness, the brake light connectors, the brake light switch, and a couple other things. So basically, I'm no longer gonna be able to sell the body harness, but we will have the factory connectors. So I'm about to lay that out and cut it apart, and then we'll get the relay board in the car, and then we'll get inside the car and start wiring. I have now made the age-old mistake of waiting too many days between clips and trying to film too many videos in amongst each other, because I'm jumping back and forth between projects with this car. Like, I'm not just doing like all electrical and then all, well, electrical wiring, same thing. Like, I'm not doing all the wiring in like one video, or so like I'm doing the wiring as I'm plumbing the nitrous system, as I'm fitting the headers, as I'm doing this, as I'm doing that. It's like I'm filming clips for each video in between, and I made a boo-boo and I forgot where I was at with the electrical stuff. But the other side, my relays finally showed up, so I can finish the relay board. I mounted my nitrous solenoid also to the relay board. I built some tabs to get it to fit in the car. I started getting the engine harness routed. So what we're actually doing now is I actually am gonna cut open the brand new Holley harness. So basically I had everything routed where I wanted it, checked the lengths, checked this, checked that. There's a couple connectors that I want to basically reroute from where they had them routed. Like, they have the fuel line, or the fuel pressure connector, basically routed to where it'll come out somewhere right in here. And I'm actually gonna run the pressure directly off the regulator this time instead of doing the crossover in the rails. Because previously I would run it off the end of the fuel rail, but I would have a -6 crossover line. Well, for this car, I'm doing all -8 lines, except for the return line, which will be -6. But the crossover in this particular application will be a -8. And the only fitting I have as like an interrupter is basically a -6 fitting for the fuel pressure sensor to go into. And I didn't want to order another fitting, so I'm just going to reroute the fuel pressure to right here, and it'll come out right there. So I'm going to cut up in the harness, reroute that. I'm also going to completely delete the idle air control valve sensor and the TPS sensor, and I'm going to delete the map sensor, and that is because I am drive-by-wire, not drive-by-cable, so I don't have a TPS or an idle air control valve. It's all built into the stepper motor in the drive-by-wire throttle body. And I'm not going to use a map sensor. This engine will never be able to be boosted. It's not a boost type engine. It's built for nitrous. So I'm never going to exceed what the Holley can read, which I think is 3 bar. I think the internal factory, or the internal map sensor in Terminator X is 3 bar. I'm not positive on that, but I'll never exceed what the ECU's direct map sensor can handle, and I always prefer to use it anyways. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it, and then reroute a couple of the other wires, get the harness reloomed and put in the car, and then I'll show you exactly what I did. And then after that, it's basically hook everything up to the relay board, wire the fuel pumps, headlights, taillights, and the wiring should be done with the car. All right, so I'm back on wiring because I'm waiting on dry sump fittings that I failed to order when I placed my first order. But we're pretty much done with wiring, actually, minus battery cables and basically just like tidying everything up. So I'm gonna kind of just sit in the car and walk you guys through why I did what I did, and like common mistakes I've made with other cars, so that hopefully somebody sees this video one day and can learn from all the mistakes that I and everybody else have made in the past. So, first things first, this is my relay board. It's a little hectic right now because I haven't zip tied all these and cleaned everything up, but this is pretty much what it's gonna look like when it's done. Like I said, I gotta tie all this back together, but these are all my trigger wires. Super important to use every different color wire that you can. I've seen people wire, and I'm guilty of it too. I've done it before where I wired entire cars with like 4 wire colors, thinking I would never have a problem, and lo and behold, 6 months from now you have a wiring problem and you're digging through diagrams only to realize that the diagrams you made have 4 wire colors on them and everything is red or white or black or brown or whatever the color is. This is actually the wiring kit from my old ARC panel. I never used it on my S14, so I think their kit comes with like 15 different colored wires. So that was pretty convenient. These are all my trigger wires for the relay. they go up here to a Deutsch connector. I think that's how you say it, Deutsch, which goes to all of my switches and my kill switch and my nitrous controls, etc., to basically allow me to trigger the relays to turn on certain functions in the car. Always use a relay. Those toggle switches are only rated for like 20 amps. People are really guilty of putting power straight to the toggle switch straight to the fans or the headlights or the ECU or whatever. Most fans, at least the ones I run, pull, I think, a continuous rate of 30 amps and an inrush current of like 65 to 70 amps. So those switches will melt pretty quick, and then your fans will stop working trackside and you'll wonder why. If you just use a relay, a high amp relay, they're designed to take all that load and all that force for extended periods of time and that heat. They don't burn out nearly as much. So basically, like, the trigger wires only take like, I think they only need to hold like 5 amps. It doesn't take a lot of power to trigger the relay. It's just basically telling the relay to trip the circuit to turn the main power system on and power whatever function in the car. So always use different colors. Always bulkhead it if you can. Deutsch connectors can get pretty expensive, but like, don't tell anybody, but I've been really guilty about using not the cheaper kit off of Amazon, but the Amazon like Deutsch connector kit, and not going to like some crazy high-end wiring website and ordering them. Seems like they're the same connectors to me, and I've never had a failure, and I've been using them for about 3 years now. So always bulkhead it though. That way, if you ever need to take the switch panel out trackside, like all the way out of the car, you don't have to disconnect all the wires from the relay board, which if you wired them properly, there's not really a way to disconnect them from the relay unless you use spade connectors, which I don't like. That's a big no-no. So always bulkhead it, Deutsch connect it, do something. So now I just unclip the switch panel, the whole switch panel comes out. What else have I messed up? I think that's pretty much it. The only other thing would be, make sure you give yourself a little bit of extra length. Like, it's neatier and tighter. Neatier? I think that's a word. It's more neat if you cut them shorter into like the perfect length on your relay board, because then you have less wire to tuck up. It's just easier to work with, less loom. It's easier as a whole. The downside is, what if you just need to pull the switch panel or something out real quick, in a 5-minute call, just to check like a fuse or a wire, or see if something just came loose, and you don't want to remove it all the way out of the car. If you give yourself, I think I gave myself like 5 inches of extra wire length. This is about where my switch panel should sit. You could now unbolt it from the center console and pull it all the way forward to the shifter, in theory, and then not have to disconnect everything and pull it all the way out. And so then, like, maybe you just pull the panel out and realize, oh, there's just a loose wire. You tighten the wire real quick, throw the panel back in, it takes you 30 seconds instead of 2 minutes. So it's just like little things that you can think of along the way to kind of speed up what you might have to do trackside, because drifting is all about being able to do things basically as quick and efficient as possible, because you don't have a lot of time between runs. You only get 1 5-minute timeout, and wiring can be a big failure point. A lot of people don't think to check it. Like, everybody nut and bolt checks their car, but they don't check their wiring connections. And like, just look at the amount of screws. I mean, there's 3, 6, 9, 12. There's 12 on the grounding block alone. There's going to be 10, 20 more power out wires from the relays to the accessories. There's 10 on the switch panel. There's 4 on the kill switch. There's countless connectors on the nitrous outlet, like control panel back here. Like, so just think, that's another like 50 or 60 failure points that people don't commonly check. So just little things like that. But wiring's basically done. That's minus, I've got to make the ground cables and the battery cables, which I'm going to put the car up here in the air in just a minute, make the battery cables, and then show you guys where I put my batteries, why I put my batteries there, how I'm doing my battery cables, where I'm putting my breaker and kill switch, and how I'm doing all that stuff. And that will end off wiring. At that point, I bench tested everything, so I already know the relay board works, I already know the switch panel triggers all the functions I need to trigger. So we just need to get some battery cables in here, just check all the circuits and make sure like the headlights work, brake lights work, tail lights, fuel pumps, all that jazz, and the nitrous solenoids. But that should be everything. So we'll get some battery cables in here, and we'll show you guys how I do the batteries in just a minute. Alright guys, as you can see, I've got the car up in the air right here. I've got all the battery cables finally finished, all the way from both Optimas all the way to the alternator and back, all the positives, all the grounds. So for the first time since I started this build, actually, the car has its own power. No more jumper cables or power probes or anything to make sure features work. It's got its own power. So I've got both batteries wired in parallel, which basically means I still have a 12-volt system. I've just got the charging power and battery power of both the Optimas, which basically means the negatives are wired together and the positives are wired together, and then the batteries go all the way to the front. So as you can see, I've got the cables looped over where the stock fuel crossover would be, and then tied together, and then they're just grounded to the chassis on their respective sides just to have multiple grounds. And then they go through where the stock e-brake would go through, and then that goes all the way to the front of the car. So I've got two ICT billet Optimum battery brackets in the car. As you guys can see right here, I basically plated the floor all the way around just in case, because the metal there is extremely thin. But I wanted to put them here because I think both these batteries weigh roughly 60 pounds or so. I'm not really sure on the weight, but I'd have to check. But I feel like I Googled it and it was like 60 pounds. I don't know. Either way, I basically tried to add the weight back into the stock fuel tank area because I have that beautiful radium up there. So this should add basically some weight back to like the stock weight of the car. So what I've done is basically try and create roughly what the stock fuel tanks would weigh, and then add some more weight over the center axle slash diff. This is a transaxle, so I'm not really sure that's going to work, but we'll see. Either way, this is why I chose my batteries here. It's just trying to get the weight balanced somewhat back to stock after adding the cage and removing like the stock fuel tank and putting the radium in and whatever else. So I'm going to put the car down, and we'll show you guys the cables in the front of the car and how the wiring turned out, and then we'll test the systems. And once all that's done, that will basically conclude wiring. So let's get to the top of the car. We were like this close to being done with at least the wiring to start the car. Technically I'm still done with the wiring to start the car, but I made two big boo-boos, one of which I told you guys specifically, hey, make sure you leave yourself enough room on your wires to be able to pull your switch panel out. And I did on every wire except for the two really important ones that power the car. I guess I didn't really realize when I was making the battery cables how far out the switch panel sat. So my switch panel can't come out any further. That's as far out as it can go. And it still needs to come out about another probably 4 inches to at least be able to work on it, if not more. And at least 2 more inches to be able to bolt it into the dash. So it looks like tomorrow I'll be going to buy more battery. Well, I have probably a battery couple here. I'll be going to buy some more terminal ends to remake the starter cable and the cable that runs from the breaker to the kill switch, or to the battery. Yeah, from the breaker to the kill switch, and then from the kill switch to the starter, because both those lines are about 3 inches too short. So it looks like we'll be doing that, which puts me on pause for the wiring tonight. And I somehow managed to do this. I screwed the breaker into the side right here where the dash mounts, and it broke it off. So I need to go buy a breaker too. That breaker was kind of old. I've had it for a while, so I don't know if the plastic was just weak or if I over tightened it or what, but it cracked it off almost instantly. So yeah, I need more parts. So that's gonna wrap up wiring for tonight.